je jan je de lo na ro dan marbai me lai ju je gai bo ba zai je zai gen je gar ma ba je je chong je ju ban zi nam ta ga da sa sa ya ba ra di do ba zo sa la sa ja ji la nga ni re nya me ro go da bo ga ju la sro wa de so ga ju la ma na yu ban ze no nam da ra sin ji la xian la gom je gam ba song ba yi se na ra ga la ja yi me ba da sen de du dai ju be gom ji la yin ga ra yin ba me ba ra sin ji la me ge gong ji go ra song ba yi me nga der go ji be la ma la yun de zoro wa de be gom ji la ye me ge je wa ra sin ji la ye me gom ji ngui ye song ba yi kan ya lo ba ngo wo so ma de ma je de ga ran jum be gom ji la gom za lo da ra wa ra sin ji la nam do ngo wo ji ge song ba yi je ya ma ye je ya ja wa la manga ro ba ran jar be gom ji la ko ran de ye me do ba ra sin ji la ye wa ye gan de yan da la ma ta ra me je ja ba la lo ju je sa da lam je yun di ra zo ne do ra je jang ge gong ba nye do yo san je ju dai zo je jo nam la san ja ba ra de da ne ja zhen ji na ge ji zo ji be sun nam ji ro lai ben zer san ji zhe ba re yo san ji ju dai zo ji jo nam la san ja ba ra de da ne ja zhen ji na ge ji zo ji be sun nam ji ro la ben zer san ji zhe ba re yo san ji ju dai zo ji jo nam la san ji ba ra de da ne ja zhen ji na ge ji zo ji be sun nam ji Rola Pinzara Sanji Raba Yo Semchi Tamchi Deva Dan Deva Jadai Dimbar Jirje Dongara Dai Dongara Jadai Ravara Jirje Dongara Mebe Deva Tamba Bandra Vara Jirje Nyere Jada Ninda Rava Tanya Jimbola Nebara Je Simchi Tamchi Deva Dan Deva Jadai Dimbara Dongara Dan Dongara Jada Ravara Je Dongara Mebe Deva Tamba Bandra Vara Je Nyere Jada Ninda Rava Tanya Jimbola Nebara Je Semchi Tamchi Deva Dan Deva Jadai Dimbara Je Dongara Daya Dongara Jada Ravara Je Dongara Mebe Deva Tamba Bandra Vara Je Yere Jada Ninda Rava Danya Jimbola Nebara Je Dada Simji Tamji Lo Chisan Rovara Sinji Lamda Zor Lamda Rovara Sinji Lamda Zor Lantraba Savara Sinji Lamda Zor Shaba Yeshe Jawara Sinje Labda Zoy Dada Simje Tamje Lochi San Rovara Sinje Labda Zor Lamda Rovara Sinje Labda Zor Lantraba Sanvara Sinje Labda Zor Shaba Yeshe Jawara Sinje Lamda Zoy Dada Simje Tamje Lochi San Rovara Sinje Lamda Zor Lamda Rovara Sinje Lamda Zor Lantraba Sanvara Sinje Lamda Zor Shaba Yeshe Jawara Sinje Labda Zo Horji Yerje Nezanza Pema Gezare Dombo La Yanze Joge Ngudrain June Jizain Dai Goradai Gandru Mamboika Keje Jizai Dadram Je Sinje Labza Jesa Nem Joy Dare Simbola Rem Joy Dala Wanjegar Geda Londre Barje Zan Jodai Dhamma Ngudraza Homa Avoy Bezarangare Bemai Sedewa Homa Avoy Bezarangare Bemai Tunten Zara Bezar Samayan Zanza Sarawai Siddhi Bala Hong Ar Mar Nazar Azarya Sedare Renza Dai Gere Kandru Suji Dajam Bebunam La Lulai Geye Sinjela Alai Zonge Sinjela Ilai Duji Sinjela Wanya Govara Sinjela Jijay Dabara Sinjela Lanjan Jombara Sinjela Gejay Dobara Sinjela Mavoy Bedrangara Bema Devandagini Kaya Abiginda Wom Waga Biginda Sada Biginda Wom Sarva Habiginda
Lo manor awara chicken thing chambe Yeshe Drogon Yela Konga Padra Rigbe Dorje Shaolang Chan Sara Pandin Sabe Lama Rinpoche Dage Jewar Pende Danyone Gadin Chimbo Gone Jizon de Koson to Yang Order Sadu. Tennis number Samala, not to delicts and a shiatang, Monga Tatan Yamba Simjin Tamje, Lan me Payanta Bazobu Sanje Combata Barcha, Tate Chadala. Tambichu, some sugar yin, Yamba Gono Chanjum Chodo, took Jene, Sanona, that's the Marchavi Chune, Naranso Montune, Terchen Barway Dorje gang, Gumbumnani Shodegi Yori, Tenita Tenation Wings.
Good morning, everyone. Please generate bodhicitta as your motivation for listening to the teachings with the thought all beings throughout space must achieve perfect Buddhahood, and that it is in order to bring that about that you will listen to the Dharma. We are concerned here with our continuing exploration of the collected songs of Terchen Barway Dorje. We'll continue now from where we left off yesterday afternoon.
Ransom Pami Yingwa Yingwa Mada Ransom Pami Yingwa Gamdella Sola Ransom Rigby Sese Lange Tensum Rigby Junjunwa Sosiriba Rango Sheba Te Loy Ring Tong Nyanyur Mahirovat Ramba Tota Neso Chechonga Shesam Tensam Tenga Jongale Sit up Jonged up Jaya Majawat Lame Mugum Matan Chewa Gom Standela Ransom Pami Yim Gam de la Satang Ransola Pena Comba Chotu Chubachi Majong Bardor Tene Gom sinking te Nyambia the Jesup and De Togi Mati. Then de Matub Gam Dawajilla Chai Yapayena, Tan Nyambia Gaps and Dawaji in a young, Tene Kona Nyambar Yani, Chilla Ripati, the Yabayena Yang, Te Ning Patani. Kona Rigwat Chella Ing Dog Yoris, then it ing do the capsula, then it repair the pan to Natan, their mount tatas to some gay, then it check number nasoba, Lega Khan Cheba, then it choke carret dopa, then you think and Dota Zang carret chong yobandavote, then it Sam la Shane. Rama Mapa the Chella Shonda Gamda in the Yunga Yorde, Tatella Ransom Pami Yunga Gap, Senata Tella Sungi Yorde, Gam Della Sola Ransom Rick Theatre, yes, that's so Sem Te. Then Sem Tony Yenaya, Chatanga, that's Sem Te, Sosuke, Ransom Ripa, Kaya, Jadola, Canala, then Sono Chatan Capsula. Ta sem de chilola to some number te ya then sosu ke sem te ke ranshok hakoto yori o ngag sem te yain la song do wa sambata botin sem te ke sosu sem te ke sem ge ngolo ta yom kapsula ta she to yori ta de ta bo sola na sem rikbe set yes ta chick no sing one. Takora she young with cup tella, lange, tens of the young ones. Then the jay Namton Togo one to son de Maimpa. Lange said the Kade or Ying Dua, Sambanda Temba. That Kodan Debi Jimaji, Mount Pag and Limusin, that take Namto Kodan Kare, Tambo, some Karenda was shower in a taking on a lange, ten somebody ngala, teni requat net tobazone, repeat Jun Tela, summary was. That in the song Yabanda, summary one. Rango Shepate, that's also yin do Pahakon, that's also getting my chicken report, Rango Shayum capsula, that tella cora, and Deputy Majim Hompag and Limason and Tige, all at net about this also. Slick Rango Shepate, lawyer, ringtone, Yanyan Machor was, that's also gay, long, shut up, take Teni Sosuke report and Tonyum capsula, Teni tell a Yanyan Machorwa, said the capsula, Tayan tell a Koran Namtoki J. Yan Demount Tata Tusum the Pantondo or Maimpa, Yanyo to Machorwa Gone, Ramba told and Neso Chechunya, Ramba to that date they will capsula Yanam to Yambati Shariona, Shawa taking Walla, Ranging, Payado, Mato, Tenepena, Tele, Pendum, Mundovanda, with someone that then I shook younger. Pena Rambabla, Yad, they will capsula, and shook it, that shook a ballap, para part dead there by Yena, so they can make that the ballap, chicky, Yamanda, which one announced Tonga that day. And I attend the day of Mother Conada Bay, Gendola, Nicona, Joan of Yodi, Tati in the capsule, so gay, Pena, Namto, Jing Toa taking on a unit, what they told Mother Yambachi younger that the say Joana, taking on a net of a zone, Rambam, Turtam, Neso Jejoyans, Tenicona, taking on a net topak to Kasek into net topanda with the nene. She some ten some tenga jonale, she some chick. Kodan Nomto, Tambo Zambo Chihawa in a Zambo, she some chick that take a Tawata. Nomto Yambachi Shawa in a take a Jesum Mandova, she some checking on. Tene jonale, sit up, joined up, Jaya Meparcha, start telecona, take a Jesel and Drovaki. Chavanda Wakare Yimba the Tamjete, Jaya Meparcha, Lama Mugum Madan Chewagam, Teni Yane, Yando Katan Kondikubata Dula, Teni Sosoke, Teta Gum Lamdan Dovatan, Gam La Pache Mepatan, Lame Kosong Toki Chinap Tamche Ran and Jone, Teni Rang and Lunga Yesum Te, Tal Lata Lameke Kosong Toda Yemepone. Rana Yope Ranjung Hikanelo searching the topper chave chatola, Sene Lama la Mugutang. Or Tetaba Muguyan Tapa Chewa Chepa la, Tamatapa, Mata, Chewa Gombate, Carchen Barway or Matamata, Chewa, the Magamna, that the Nicorampe, Nomdo the Jain Landon, Tatanda, Sombuke Capsula. On topic of Tapian number not sober. Tateke capsula candego, Maumba capsula candego, Tening on a tanegate, Davicatene, Namto, Jum Machi Panda watching over your tea in the capsula. Homa, Kadam gave she some checking, Yamen Zeb capsula, Tenis Sosuke, Kora Yuseke, Dunge, that go Togala in Iron, Candy. She Kala, Choyo Bayana, Tatik Tosa Rixala, Maing Ang, Chewa, sinking to Yigay, Chambo, Tenny, that Teta was so la Tensam, Kumazo, Chedola, Yane, Te Yabala Ten, that Sosuki Chokareto Patella, Pache Mepa, Surgeon the land up to Banda was in the younger yard, Te in the Casala, Te Tabagone, Matan Chewa Gomba, Matan Chewa Gombata. Gambacha, Gams, Teparagazano.
Didn't
Oh, ma, sing you, Mother Lamdo. Take it, Lobo, Taje, Gyamtso, Water, Barway Dorje. Can't say Barway. Barway, talk whatever.
Barway Dorje, the Gewar.
Barway
Gewa Yoma show, Gewa Dropa show.
Barway Dorje, never Gawar show, all that, that's all.
Gewa shows. Continuing from where we left off yesterday afternoon, we now turn to the next song, which is on page 94, and begins with the first line, "When your mind's careless and distracted." So the subject of the song is what to do when you find that you are suffering from distraction and carelessness. Now, the context for this is that until we achieve a very august level of training, there's still going to be a difference between even placement and subsequent attainment. In other words, between meditation and post-meditation. And as long as there is still a difference between meditation and post-meditation, there is still the possibility of distraction. And distraction basically arises when we fall into the habitual behavior of conceptualization, thinking about the past, thinking about the future, or thinking about the present, which is really thinking about the past, as we saw yesterday. So the need for means of responding appropriately to distraction is great. The use of the word careless here implies that distraction comes from a kind of carelessness, a kind of inattention. And this is true in the sense that what prevents distraction is mindfulness and vigilance or alertness. So in a sense, we could say that when we become distracted, it is because we have allowed our mindfulness and alertness to slip. However, this is going to happen because we have a beginningless and deeply entrenched habit of doing so. The second line gives the short answer to the question, what do we do when our mind is careless and distracted? And the short answer is, apply awareness to your mind itself. Now, the mind itself, which means your fundamental mind, your undiluted mind, is, of course, emptiness. But it is not a dead emptiness. It is cognizant emptiness, emptiness that is capable of knowing and experiencing. And as we saw yesterday, that is the defining attribute of a mind. Among the mind's native abilities is the ability to be aware of itself. At any moment, your mind can, if it chooses, if you choose, because your mind is what you call you, if you choose, it can, instead of being aware of things other than itself, it can be aware of itself. So this is the key to recovering from distraction. When we are distracted, it's usually in one of two ways. Either we're thinking and caught in thinking about things, or we are simply not aware of anything. In either case, as soon as you notice that you're distracted. And you can't do anything until you notice that you're distracted, because until you notice that you're distracted, you're distracted. But as soon as you notice that you're distracted, simply turn the distracted mind in on itself. In other words, the faculty of mind that enables distraction, the part of the mind, there aren't really parts of mind, but if you think of it that way, the part of the mind that gets distracted is the same part of the mind, the same faculty of mind that remedies distraction. So when you notice that you're distracted, you're noticing that there's what you will think of as a part of you. It's actually just the mind, but it's a part of you that's wandered. Just turn it from the outside back in. Turn it in on itself. Because it is equally capable of being distracted and looking at itself. It's not harder for it to look at itself than it is to look at or think about anything else. It's just as easy. It's just not, we're not used to doing it. So the short answer is turn the distracted mind in on itself. What this involves, to look at it another way, is simply not prolonging the past, not thinking about the past, not beckoning the future, not thinking about or speculating about the future, and not conceptualizing the present, which actually is impossible, because as soon as you conceptualize it, it's the past. But anyway, when you do that, you will discover one of two things. Either, depending upon the type of distraction and depending upon how quickly you noticed it, either there will be a thought in your mind. You'll catch yourself in the middle of a thought, or there won't be a thought. If there is a thought in your mind, simply look directly at the nature, the stuff of that thought, the fabric, what it's made up of, not the content of the thought. The difference between the stuff of a thought and the content of a thought is like the difference between what waves are made of, water, and the shape of a wave, a curly wave, a flattish wave, and so on. So if there's a thought, turning inward simply means looking directly at the nature or stuff of the thought. If there's no thought, if it's the other type of distraction, or if it's taken long enough for you to turn inward that the thought has already vanished, don't try to summon up the last thought. Simply look directly at what recognized that you were distracted. Because what recognized that you were distracted is the same thing as what was distracted. And it's also, of course, the same thing as what you want to look at. And this turning inward, Rinpoche said, is what we call the return to freshness. The mind that is distracted is stale. The mind that is turned inward, that is cognizant of itself, aware of itself, is fresh, because it's always in the present moment. The rest of the song amplifies and gives more detail to that second line. Apply awareness to your mind itself. The third line says, cultivate awareness through mere alertness. The key to cultivating self-awareness, the mind's awareness of itself, is to restrict the cultivation to mere alertness, mere awareness. Don't try to do more than that. Don't try to exclude everything else. Don't try to stop things from happening in the mind. And don't try for something more or something better than the mind's simple cognizance of itself. This fresh awareness recognizes itself, because all you need here is what Rinpoche called the return to freshness. This fresh awareness, the mind that is present in the present, or we could simply say the mind that is present, will naturally recognize itself, because it has no other object, can go nowhere else. Don't get lost in conceptual appraisal. Don't get lost in conceptual appraisal means don't try to do more than that. Anytime we try to do more or better than mere simple awareness of the mind itself, we're actually engaged in a judgment, prejudice, and we're trying to do something impossible, and it will spoil it. So don't judge it, because that's not freshness. Letting go, whether there is stillness or movement, cultivate mere recognition, mere presence. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means allowing your mind to come to rest naturally. It's like letting a leaf that falls from a tree just naturally fall to the ground, as it will, without messing with it. So the opposite of letting go is micromanaging your mind, meddling, which, as we saw yesterday, is, in fact, the cause of samsara. It's what we do all the time. So letting go, whether there is stillness or movement, again, as we saw yesterday, if there's self-recognition, if the mind recognizes itself, it makes no difference whether the mind is still, without thought, not thinking, or engaged in movement, thinking. It doesn't matter. Just as a recognition of the water in the ocean doesn't depend upon the presence or absence of waves. Doesn't matter. It's just water. Can't be anything else. So cultivate mere recognition, mere presence. That means, again, Rinpoche said, no more than that. No more than mere recognition. Don't try to do more than that. That is enough. That is, in fact, all you can do. Allowing the mind to recognize itself. Now, the reason why it needs to be mentioned, don't do more than that, is when you do this, it will seem very ordinary. It won't seem special. You may think, well, there has to be something more than this. There has to be something more special, more pious, more fantastic. But anything that's more special, that's more pious and more fantastic is just delusion. This is the only thing that isn't delusion. Don't appraise or force anything. So just let your mind recognize itself. Don't judge. Don't attempt to evaluate, don't engage in analysis the way you would in hearing and reflection. Just let it recognize itself. And don't force anything means don't attempt to do more, because that will cause you to follow thoughts. If you try to force or something to happen in your mind, in other words, you try to turn movement into stillness or stillness into movement and so on, you'll spoil it. So those lines are elaborations or explanations of the meaning of the second line, apply awareness to your mind itself. So they are the details of how to do that. Next, the song turns to the need for, as we saw in every song yesterday, the need for a supporting environment, a supporting psychological environment for this to work. And again, that consists of devotion and the desire for freedom. So the next line says, meditate on devotion for your guru. As we saw yesterday, the most powerful force in our lives and in our practice that will ensure that our meditation progresses on the correct path and that will prevent obstacles to our progress is a devotion for the Guru, for the reasons that were stated in detail yesterday. However, as we've also seen, for devotion to be authentic and genuine, it depends upon a sincere desire for freedom. The only way that we will have a sincere desire for freedom is if we retain an awareness of impermanence. So therefore, the next line says, meditate on devotion for your Guru and on death and impermanence. If we don't recollect the imminence of death and the fundamental fact of impermanence, our priorities may become skewed, and that makes us prone to distraction. So even though we may have considerable devotion, we still need a heartfelt and repeated, regular recollection of impermanence. It was the custom of the great masters of the early Kadampa tradition to write in large letters on a place where they would see it while seated in meditation, the words, "Be undistracted, death is coming." Our motivation for being undistracted comes from an awareness of the imminence of death. And so, along with devotion, in order that our practice progress, we need to maintain an awareness of impermanence. And then the song concludes with the colophon. This was written for the disciple Terchen Gyamtso, to whom a previous song was also addressed, by Barway Dorje, may there be virtue.
Tarindala Sahite Sikhogo Navando Careless Senna Ta Kazan Tering Yons Dobala Terchen Song Debeke Takoran Moto Tondo Kanga La Samo Tamayana Take Saji Shalop Tondo choosing Tombo Davore Deva Turning on a Taneke Take Saji Society Quicker La Tando Capsula Tene Kange Zani Mepandavochi Tundu Katanda Vochila Tosa Nijanja, and answer Shuzewanda Johnson. Then te Sajita Ngara Dan Davik, Kora Simjin, Jetanga let Tambo Perek Dabo. On a Tanegi Jenny, Samgo, Nelu Singo Kendavolaina, Tat Telate Saji Kora Hajang, Coachimo Meva. San Home Manua, Rick Manum Sal, Song de Wanda, of Georis. Tay and look after La Tacheta, Gomna Chai Chapa Yenayam, Pen to Tagi, Jagomta, Kuselepin, Jogom Senata, Gom Jatanda, Walla, Yavaris. Tang another man, Chehot and Davochi Yena, so and Davote, Jagom Gatone, Sobjonte, Shook Chan, Davochi Pena, Tanam Galuson Davochi Yoris, Jering and answer gay. Shene Gomdan Davochi La Chai Jabayena, Tene Shene Chabarjenda, Shene Sambo was in Yungi Yori, Tene Shene Sambo and Davochi La Chai Jana, Tene Namba Sanjepa Mogote, Koran Jadangi, Chenang Nigag, Tene Korante Tambo Gombeke. Koran Luso Yori. Te Gombeke Kapse Yenayata, Tande, Koran Gomre, Tamjek and Nan Sombeke, Tene Koran Tambo Telata, Lunila, Namna Chudu, Tene Ta, Tendechen, Jayatan, Ta Lunila, Namna Chudun te Jayoma Yena, Tene Lutana, Satana, Namna Chudun, the Dick Chick Son of Sonia won't say. Lutana, Satan, same tongue, that same ne say on the capsule, ranking, Kora, namto nyongata sem ne toba tende yunga yore tene tege toni sosuke mekpan ramanda ta himota dobo la soba khana yam mekpa son nongen dabo yore te ta so ngaran so namba sanje pandabo jina tene so chek wong jingop tela mekpa hyok shembo te ak luso yore wo pa soron jemba kansero ko pa dowata soro ngopati chekla tebe kapsula ta tingola repate ni hyo saje ke patalandro ya kale tende chene tene rembe yandola ya kondola ro tope ke tapye na ya tela karchembo sege de tate kare ina kona se ring ke tene tela ya pen chembo yore singe ji songa dos tene to da wo chik te ta tope ke ko da wo ko tende la ta kora ribate ke lo so yore te ko ten to mata be sale jane tene tela ribate yo ma kapsala o konde pe ya po zendo samba konde la puka hita mendo samba ko te ke chin chik de che chin chik de chong do samgen da wo tene na te nam do re ma to chik te gom kha ma re te ta ba mai ba chik ton ko te la kora rangi ge ta te la ribate ne ting gola ne samji che ne tene gom yo ba kapsala ta te ta wala ten ne rembe chan da ko ne kompenda ba kapsala maung pala ta cherem hlage nanjro gombe ke kapsala tel pe masepe pento chembo yo sene ta tende chen ta song dong do ten do kapsala ta te ta bu ke le thangbo pa yena tende ne go to pa yena tene tek se tab devo anda wo che yo de tene kone kompendo do kapsala tene cha cha chembu ke ta kora shene senghen da wata tene rimbe kendo do kapsala ta kone kome mangbon do kapsala tene ta tanda ripa soma senghe tengala ne to banda wata tende chene do yore ta tela ta wo che yena ta shene ne yom kapsala yena ya gam ne pa tambo rezar gambapyo ta wo sene song yore tene te kare de sena ta shene la thambo ne ong ke khansa yin na ta lu ne tondo sang ta kora sem tondo kare la mikpa te na tende chen ne yong kapsula tene nam to che ki je la ni chen nam to jin tho da man tho la o ta tende ke nam to mang bo chin do tende na ta gom singe ta wa ni ja nu sa ma ri sam gong ke nam to tende yong se ke de yon sekerete ta te nepa tambo reja nepa tambo reza gambapcho tabo yin song yo bare te dobo kaya mare te pato la ngaran soge kona gom senghe de tan soge yo mare gom senghe de tan mozo de kapsala sem senghe de tene kona de mao tata tu samla kona namdo de jog do yore namdo jog do ya te la khase jog thup to ma to namdo le da ko yo ma de te me tu kapsala namdo ngu sing yo ma de ta shine gom yo kapsala ta ne pa tambo de za gambap cho ta se yon de kapsala a tene namdo mangpo chen de sene namdo de ngu sing yo ma de te ngu sing de kapsala ta da ngu sing ba ta de one ta ne sem ne ma chu ba namdo de ngu sing yo de da ngu sing ba ta ba de ta te do po khan ya ma de ta ne pa thang bu ke so le bi wa de te kam se be ya po de ta ke che ho de ga de sen na tende chung kap sa ta de gom de sa ma de sam le yo ya na ta te ya po san ma de tene khale pa khana me ba de do de te mai ba che ke khase chung yin na ya ta te ta do la so su ke do ru che ne tene gom te ja wu yin na tene rembe yen do la nam do nyong ro do ne ta ne pa che la chong rang ke ba chu ta bo se ne song don do ta te kare de se na ta che je la yon do pe la yo de cho chong pa yon do kap so la ga de sa ke thok kan pa ga de sa ke ho ne pam do de tong se te ke khoya yo ban da bo la ngone tane ki chon thoya me wanda ta te nda bo yori te ndo ta nam to te se hero song ne je ta nam to tu la te se yo ba yana ya ma che ho te la kora hewanda bo je la ne top do be ke tu gam da bo yung ge yori ta te la chon nong ge bab cho ta bo song ne pa ni pa te la song ge yori tene ne pa thama te tene Gyamtso chenpo lap da tawa da bo se ne song do yori te yendu kapsala ngone tane ta ne pa thaman da bo te la cha ya pa yen na tene Gyamtso chenpo ta bo te yang lap da tawa ke Gyamtso se na nom to da tawa rangin ge ya che hin ting sa pa tende ke ta kona apena ne tsoban da bo tende yung ge yori ta te ta bo chung kapsala tene rembe yen do nyam ja tang ye sab den den da ba ka kap sala tene magic lab je drama ke phaji thamba sanje la tene to pa phwa ta bo tene je ranga nyen sen khoyo sem gam nyung ma la jun che me pa ta sen ta tende chen yong thong ke tende yong ge yo de is
I think I'd better provide a context for the topic of these songs. You may have noticed that all of the songs we've looked at yesterday and this morning all basically consist of pointing out instructions designed to remind and help disciples who are already able to sustain a self-recognizing awareness. So for beginners, for those who are just starting out in Dharma practice, these songs are largely descriptions of utterly unfamiliar territory. To give you a context for where these instructions will become applicable. In general, we have two types of meditation, and these are called the analytical meditation of a pundit and the resting or placement meditation of a yogin. And in most cases, the resting meditation of a yogin, which is being described here, must be preceded by training in the analytical meditation of a pundit. And only once a conceptual certainty has been gained through the analytical meditation can one practice the placement or resting meditation, through which one destroys that conceptual certainty and replaces it with direct experience and realization. However, both of these, analytical and placement meditation, are aspects of the practice of insight, and therefore they both must be preceded by the practice of tranquility meditation. Tranquility meditation also has two aspects, what we call special tranquility, which is the tranquility practiced in the Mahamudra tradition, and mere tranquility. Mere tranquility is the aspect of meditation, the only aspect of meditation that is common to Buddhist and non-Buddhist traditions. All other aspects, special tranquility, and both aspects of insight are uniquely Buddhist. A mere tranquility, however, is what beginners must start with. And it begins with training in physical posture. The best meditation posture is called the 7 dharmas, or 7 features of Vairochana, because it is based on the physical posture of the Buddha Vairochana. So it is to sit with the legs fully crossed in Vajra posture, or otherwise crossed in a manner that is comfortable and supportive of the body. To sit with the spine as straight as possible, the chin tucked in, the gaze lowered to one oxbow length in front of you on the floor. The tongue touching the upper palate, the mouth slightly open, not gaping wide open and not forced shut, and so on, and the hands resting in equipoise in your lap. The point of this posture and all variations on it, all meditation postures, is basically that you sit up straight. And the rest of it is designed so that when you sit up straight, you are comfortable sitting up straight. The importance of sitting up straight is simply that if your back is straight, your channels are straight, which allows your mind to be at ease. So the function of physical posture is to place your mind in a state of wakeful ease or rest, where it is both at rest and relaxed, but not sleepy or torpid, wakeful. Then when beginners begin the practice of mere tranquility, common tranquility, they have to begin with a support. It's almost unheard of for people to be able to simply rest their mind without a focus or anchor for their attention. Often taught are visual anchors or visual supports, mundane supports such as a pebble or twig, and supramundane supports, chiefly a statue or painting of the Buddha. However, practically speaking, most people begin with a different support, not a visual one, but a tactile one, and that is the breathing. The convenience of the breathing is that we're hopefully always breathing, and therefore the support is always available, and that our breath and our mind are very closely linked. So attention to the breathing is naturally relaxing, but at the same time provides a constant focus. So in this technique, you observe the out-breath and you observe the in-breath. You do not attempt to lengthen, shorten, regularize, or manipulate them in any way. A side benefit of this technique is said to be that attention to the breathing is conducive to longevity. In any case, you direct your attention at the support, whether it is the breath or a statue of the Buddha, and you do so in a manner that will persist through all stages of meditation, and that is mere attention. Now, you've seen how the ability to sustain mere awareness, mere attention, is a key point in the higher techniques of insight that have been explored in the songs. This ability is first gained, and this is why tranquility meditation with a support is so important, is first gained through the practice of tranquility meditation with a support. For example, if you're using, Rinpoche said, a statue of the Buddha as a support, you place the statue of the Buddha within your line of vision, neither too high that you have to look uncomfortably high up, nor too low that you have to look down. And when you look at it, you just look at it, and you just rest in the act of seeing it, looking at it. That is to say, you don't think about it. You don't think, this is a nice statue, or this isn't a nice statue, or I wish the hair were a darker blue, it's too light, or that's an odd nose, or I wonder who painted the face, or why did they do the robes that way, or any of those kinds of things. You just look at it. So in that way, while you have the benefit of recollection of the Buddha, which is a special benefit of this particular technique, you also learn to suspend judgment about the object of meditation. By simply looking at the statue and not thinking about it or speculating about it, you gain the facility to be merely aware of something. And it's easiest, obviously, to gain that facility, to exercise that faculty of mind with an external object and one that interests you. As a Buddhist, you're interested in the Buddha, so therefore it's a cheerful kind of object to look at. But that ability to merely be aware of something is the skill that you will need later on when you practice the higher paths. So this is how beginners start the actual practice of meditation. In particular, attention to the body of the Buddha has tremendous benefits. It has the benefit of recollection of the Buddha, and it is also said to be a helpful preparation for the later practice of the generation stage. Then eventually, the beginner is able to practice a mere tranquility without a support, where they simply rest their mind without the need for an external focus. Then, after that, they can begin to turn to a special tranquility of Mahamudra, and then they begin through that to approach the recognition of fresh awareness, which is subsequently pointed out, usually with analytical meditation preceding the pointing out, and then they engage in the level of practice that has been described in these songs. So the songs actually are concerned with a level of practice that is a ways down the line for most of us. In addition, in any type of meditation practice, there are several stages to go through. And particularly, it's important, one of the reasons why it's important that tranquility precede insight is you want to get through these stages, these experiences during the practice of tranquility, so that they don't adulterate or color your experience of insight. So tranquility meditation is the time to go through these three stages, because essentially they are stages of tranquility, stages of the mind coming to rest. And until you have gone through them, lucid insight is highly unlikely. The first experience of tranquility, the first experience of the mind coming to rest, is called the waterfall experience. Usually this happens when you first begin to practice real meditation. That is to say, the sustained attempt to direct the mind to a single object. This is different from ritual observances and other sorts of things. This is actual meditation, whether it be on the breath, on the body of the Buddha, or whatever. And the first thing that will happen is once you start to get good at it, once you get used to doing it, and you start to be able to rest your mind on the object, is you will find that there are more thoughts running through your mind and more disturbing thoughts running through your mind than ever before. And this is called the waterfall experience because it is like Niagara Falls. It's violent, it's turbulent, it's overwhelming, and if you're stuck in the middle of it, it's apt to be unpleasant. Usually, people who lack sufficient instruction, in other words, who experience this before they're warned about it, think that they think one of two things. They either think, I'm doing it wrong, I'm thinking more than before, and that's not what's supposed to be happening. My mind is supposed to be coming to rest. So I must be doing it wrong. And then that takes one of two varieties. Either I'm not trying hard enough, and then they make their minds really tight and become exhausted and then discouraged. Or the other version of I'm doing it wrong is I've misunderstood the technique somehow. That's one thing, two varieties of one thing. The other thing that people can think is, this doesn't work. This just doesn't work. And there are, again, two varieties of that. There's this technique is crap. And then there's I'm incapable. I'm not good enough to practice meditation. So there's two responses, each of which have two varieties. And that covers most of the reactions people have to this. In fact, it's not a bad sign, it's a good sign. The waterfall experience, being overwhelmed by a violent and turbulent increase in the number of thoughts of which you are aware, is not a sign that the technique doesn't work. It's a sign that the technique is working. It's not a sign that you're practicing it wrong. It's a sign that you're practicing it right. It's not a sign that you're incapable of meditation. It's a sign that you're wholly capable of meditation. And it's not a sign that the technique is crap. It's a sign that the technique is appropriate. Because what is actually happening is your mind is starting to settle down. Now, why would you experience your mind settling down as violent turbulence of thought? Because you never meditated. You may have done all sorts of other things, pious or whatnot, but you've never meditated. And never having meditated, you've never had the space in your mind to notice how much is going on in there. We're very good at avoiding this. Even Buddhists, we're very good at finding lots of ways to distract ourselves so that we never actually have to face the turbulence of our own mind. People can go for years this way, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And I don't like to meditate. And the reason people don't like to meditate is because they don't want to deal with their own mind. Well, you have to. If you want to do what the Buddha did, you are going to have to deal with this. And the first step is providing space and limiting your attention to one thing. The statue, the breath, the twig, the pebble does that. For the first time, because you have an anchor, you notice how much is trying to pull you away from that anchor. It's like if you have a boat that's just floating on a lake without an anchor, you don't notice being pulled back and forth until you start to bump into the rocks. But if you put an anchor down, then you notice the tug against the anchor, right? Well, it works that way. And that's why tranquility with a support is so essential in the beginning. You cannot avoid it. You cannot skip it. And so the first step of really starting to get it is that your mind seems to be incredibly turbulent. Well, it's good news. That is actually the first stage of true tranquility. Your mind was always that turbulent. You just didn't recognize it. You were too good at avoiding it. Now, the danger, Rinpoche said here, is that most people give up at that point. They cling to one of the four responses, that we talked about earlier. And then they just give up. Because it's not pleasant. It's not what you wanted. It's not what you signed up for. So the important thing, and the reason why this experience is presented ahead of time in competent instruction, is that it's not a sign you should give up. It's a good sign. It's the best sign. It's a sign that you should keep going. If you keep going, eventually it will lessen. Because your mind starts to get used to and starts to become habituated to paying attention to one thing at a time, which is, remember, no less natural to your mind than being distracted. It's not harder per se than being distracted. It's just we're not that used to doing it. We're used to avoiding it at all costs. You know, I mean, we have developed a technology designed to reduce our attention spans to the length of the attention span of a gnat, maybe even an amoeba. Gorillas who learn sign language have longer attention spans than teenagers nowadays. I'm serious. You know, we have developed a culture of avoidance of dealing with our own mind. I mean, anyway, so then if you continue, eventually the turbulence will lessen. And the second experience of tranquility is that you experience your mind not as a waterfall, but as a stream that flows swiftly through a gorge. It's turbulent. There's some rapids, there's some rocks, but the stream is sometimes under the ground, like through culverts and so on, and sometimes visible. In the same way, there will be times, even at this early stage, where your mind is still. In fact, it isn't really still yet. There's an undercurrent of thought that you're still not aware of, which is the stream flowing under the culvert. But you experience a kind of shallow similitude of stillness. And you start to realize that if you keep going, your mind will settle down. And if you keep going, then eventually the third and final experience of common tranquility, mere tranquility, is where your mind is like a vast lake without waves. Not like an ocean. An ocean always has waves. But it's like a huge lake that has no waves. So the surface is like a mirror. So that it's like the sky fell to earth. And your mind is as capable of being that way as it is of being a waterfall. We're just not used to it. At that point, the even placement of tranquility and the post-meditation awareness which ensues from tranquility start to mix. And that ability to mix meditation and post-meditation is essential. Because like the ability that you started to gain at the very beginning, the ability to sustain mere attention without judgment or speculation, the ability to segue from meditation to post-meditation without losing everything is essential in the later practice of insight, including the things taught in these songs. And that ability itself is praiseworthy and tremendous. For example, in her praises to her guru, Padampa Sanje, Machi Glabdran wrote, Lord Father, sometimes you sleep all day and night, a sign that natural meditation is unceasing and without breaks. Awesome.
Oh, tendere, ta tendo capsula, ta tondo nezote segona yabondo, ta tandegindi gom de mang, cheshon rawota, pendetaki, jegom nanishida, dogo mare, cosulebin jogom nan dogo yoris. Then it taken nane chang, nyame tapo lajeke, tuki malam, chepatum papa get takona, telen latene, then it kora ta. Kacha chu chingde singete. Tene kora mixe ke ta teta ke ta sonda bo song yo bare. Ta tela ten ta ngone tane hajang ge tene kansa ro ta lob jong chembo chosen tombo da bo je mai pa yin na ya. Ta tepa ta mo chepa jen ji yue la yo ba yin na. Tene tse chik lu chik la songyo dojen change komang sena ya rong. Ta tse lu chik la ta sosu ke sem ke ne lo to tonghen ke Shepherd public at the top down, Shepherd public nutrient about the shook him on your body. Johnson tell at then attack announced to Pena Payun Davotilla Chaja Bayena. Then Pama Gengo Kakashida Michinki Lama la Tepa movie Chimbo Yongin to the Garela one Tanege Koran Semon told Deba, then a shake on the castle like one Tanege. Told them like you boy, you to get in the mambo, tongue yard. That turns out that boy in a Jacom gets on the tone they were kind of mad one again. Koran Jogom gets on the tone they were shook checho, that was the tat and they young yard. They in the capsule so million double the Sosuke. That tar watching the pep tongue. Tar near watching the pep can dump one about the one. That you're watching until the radio is. Ta rinpoche ne pena pepanda wache yena, ta lam ta ringiri, lam la pache yo mari. Tene ngone rimbe, yandale sosuke sherabu tone ripe, ta je tang ne, ta tanda sanje ke somba ta de sikje darbe ser yandola nang ne. Tene rimbe yandon tato la, ta kora ngone ta ne ke sem ne lo yang ta pa te, Surgeon to na something then the young yore that tell a young then shut up thinking the cheta young dancing get hajang chosen thought up by yena yan dam no objectives young yore tell a tembic nomdo yore tell a tembic corner ye che mache then tesam yore tell a tembic gone rondo che gonke laga yore. Tende yembek tene tende penan guru Rinpoche ke songare denye mato penda tayang tur sen songare ta tenda wo kora penda ta rikben ne ngala ke dengi yena ya tondo be to kam da wota ngone tane ge tese yobare te na ngone tane ge ta lam chembo highway le pek de banda bori very step da tene ngone tane ge ta mo da wo chire de yore Tandan then Davochi and Yolam Davore, the Yore, in the capsula tata, Kazan Tring, taking song, Devan Davo, then that in attack Koran, Semte Gemon to do, and the Kona Katul and Zogo Zone, Trianda Vore, the Yore, Tan, Delaya, Kangi Checo, the Kare Yore Sena, Tepa Mugu Lam, Mandova Yena, Ya Kona, Lord Jalan Zogo, then Tan Zogo Suyame, that was in that gay. Ta kona te yore te indu kapsala ta ngone tane ge so ke chekyon da bote so la kare ki nyam ge pengin do na yang tene te ta do la tene kona jaman na tene khada ge pendo chembo yongre
I think it's good, therefore, if you gain an understanding of where the teachings given in these songs actually fit within the greater context of the entire Buddhist path of meditation. Now, within the context of styles of insight meditation, I said earlier there are the analytical meditation of a pundit and the placement or resting meditation of a yogin. You have no doubt noticed that these songs don't deal very much, if at all, with the analytical meditation of a pundit. And while for most people it's a good idea to proceed, and traditional, to proceed placement meditation with analytical meditation, it is not absolutely necessary. Especially in our tradition, which comes from the peerless Lord Gyamtso, we have a combination of two approaches integrated together. And that combination has been evident in all the songs. The name for this is the two united streams of Mahamudra and the Kadampa. which means that what Lord Gampopa taught and what we seek to practice down to the present day is a combination of the Mahamudra teachings that Gampopa received from Jetsun Milarepa and the context for this practice, such as the cultivation of the desire for freedom from samsara, the motivation of bodhicitta, and so on, as taught in the Kadampa tradition. And it is a special feature of this tradition that because of the way it's taught, because of the what you would call the hermeneutics employed since the time of Gampopa, it is possible, even for students who are not highly trained, to, through faith and devotion, achieve the state of great non-duality, the state of Vajradhara, in this very life and this very body. For example, it is customary in our tradition, especially in Eastern Tibet, for qualified teachers to point out in simple terms, simple and direct terms, the nature of their minds to functionally illiterate elderly people, of whom there are many in Eastern Tibet. And obviously, those who are functionally illiterate and don't have that much time left to live don't engage in a lot, if any, analytical meditation. They can't pursue a distant path. So you may ask, having said what you said about the need for various stages of tranquility and then analytical meditation and this, well, what makes these functionally illiterate elders so special? Faith and devotion. There are two roads we can take. Technically, they are called the path of inferential valid cognition and the path of direct valid cognition. The path of inferential valid cognition is like a great highway, a throughway. It's a very smooth road. It's well serviced. It's safe. But it takes you a little bit out of your way. So it's a longer road. It's pretty safe. And this is the approach that intelligent people usually take. They may think they're taking the other approach, but actually most intelligent people, people who think of themselves as intelligent, take this approach. This is the approach of which the Buddha spoke when he said, "Don't take my teachings on authority or out of respect. Test every statement attributed to me as you would gold you were planning on buying." Now, as I said, this is pretty safe because although it is like a great highway, you're actually traveling pretty slowly. And also what makes it safe is that the people who take this way are pretty intelligent. But there is a danger to it. And the danger is caused chiefly by the intelligence of the people who take this approach. Intelligent people are by nature speculative thinkers. Speculative thinking always leads to doubt, because doubt is embedded in speculative thinking. I wonder if. That is doubt. So therefore, there is the danger that one may become lost in speculation and therefore lost in doubt. And this is what Guru Rinpoche warned about when he said, if they don't realize this one thing, even great panditas remain deluded. So that's the highway, the big public road that is well serviced, but actually takes longer. The other way, the way taken by these functionally illiterate elders, is a shortcut. And it consists basically of what is called the Gyamtso ke loju lab go do. The danga zo nan de the lat namato konso ke ma papa ke tsik hako veryo. Yeah, it consists of what's called the grandmother's finger point. And this grandmother's finger point is often misunderstood and misexplained by many because they don't know the story, which is the origin of the expression. They think they'll often say it means like a grandmother who knows how to pick vegetables and can point them out. That's not what it comes from. At one time, while he was in Tibet, Guru Rinpoche did a retreat for, I think it was a week in a cave. I mean, he did retreats in caves everywhere. And the local people were aware of this. And every day during his midday break, a young woman would come and bring him a bowl of yogurt. And didn't say anything. And at the end of the week, he got back on his horse and was riding. He had no attendant. He got back on his horse and was riding away from the cave back towards Samye. And an elderly woman stood in his path. We say stood in the road, but there probably wasn't a road. And he looked at her and he said, "Madam, what can I do for you?" And she said, "You know that girl who's been bringing you yogurt every day?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "Well, I'm the one who sent her with the yogurt for you." And he realized that because of her faith in him and her accumulation of merit by offering yogurt, I mean, a week's worth of yogurt doesn't sound like much to us, but it's a big deal if you're in retreat, and offering anything to Guru Rinpoche is a huge deal. So he realized that the circumstances were right that he could break through all of her veils in an instant. He got down off his horse, and he pointed to the center, to her sternum. He actually touched her sternum with his forefinger. And saying that, he pointed out the nature of her mind. And the words he used to do this are in the Treasury of collected instructions. And that's what grandmother's finger point actually refers to. The finger was Guru Rinpoche's. And he was able to point out the nature of her mind because she had faith. So in that way, if you have sufficient faith and devotion, it can be pointed out directly with very little or possibly no preparation. Because in the Treasury of Instructions, it makes clear that this woman was not educated, had received, Buddhism was very new in the country. She'd received no teachings or anything. She just had faith in Guru Rinpoche. But there is a danger, Rinpoche said, to this path too. And the danger is insufficient faith and devotion. It sounds so good, sounds so easy, that we all want to be that old lady. We all want it to be that easy. But if we don't have enough faith, if we don't have enough devotion, our teacher, or Guru Rinpoche for that matter, could stick his forefinger against our sternum and say those words for 100 years straight and wouldn't break through anything. So we have to choose the path, long or short, that is really appropriate for us, recognizing the dangers that each has and the advantages that each has, and we have to be honest. So the next song is long, and there'll be no time for a Q&A this afternoon because it's the empowerment. So if you'd like to ask any questions, we have half an hour.
So, of those two words, roads you just mentioned, the highway and the grandmother's finger point, is it one or the other, or is it a combination of both?
That the lam ni somba ke the damga chen repe pena lam chik kama gona do go doam nika sene goya yorpes.
Damga chen he.
Yeah.
Then damga che chok he. Ta gemo yonde menke na damga yorma.
Losa.
Pende ta yonde pe mase pe yonke na damga yorma.
Losa. You know nika sene goya yorpes.
Sene goya se yorma.
Yomare. Chila de yolam yoto ne then chipo de gogumdwa.
Shira go.
No, you have to choose. Although a functionally literate person can't make a choice. There's the quick path of faith and devotion or nothing. But a learned pandita could always choose to take the path of faith and devotion. But you can't really mix them. Because if you're on the quick path, you don't need the slow path.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm going to ask this with the risk of it sounding like a stupid question, but I'm stupid, so I need, because I feel like I should know this already, but I don't. Can you give examples of the two types of insight meditation?
Mm-hmm.
The analytical of the pundit and what was the word for the yogin?
Placement or settling or resting.
Can you give examples of each?
The pandita chegom dong kusale ke jogong ke pesha na.
No.
Well, it's the placement meditation of a yogin is what's taught in the songs. So it's just the mind looking directly at itself, aware of itself. The analytic meditation of a pundit involves directed meditation. So in other words, it's still conceptual. You're still thinking, you're looking for something. And if it's used in the path of direct valid cognition, it's used as a preliminary. The two most famous varieties of this are Jung Nedrosum and Nejuriksum. Jung Nedrosum means origin, location, and destination, where you look to see if the mind has an origin, to see if it has a location, to see if it has a destination. Or in the less profound technique, you look to see if a thought has an origin, if it has a location, if it has a destination. So that's looking for the origin, location, or destination of thoughts. And then the other best-known form of analytical meditation is looking to observe stillness, movement, and the awareness that recognizes both. And because there's an intention, there's a directed attention, it's called analytical meditation. These two forms, however, of analytical meditation are largely used as preliminary practices within the yogic tradition, but they are technically drawn from the Pandita's analysis. Other forms of more purely analytical meditation or meditation on the great reasonings of the Middle Way school to determine the the easiest way to explain it is the way Trungpa Rinpoche explains it, which is simply this. The two approaches are, you're trying to realize emptiness, to put it in the generic Mahayana context. What we're trying to realize is emptiness. And there are two ways to realize emptiness. One way is through the analysis of external phenomena, and the other way is through the observation of the mind. Now, the analysis of external phenomena, which is the common Mahayana approach, such as employed when you meditate on the 4 or 5 great reasonings or arguments of the Middle Way school and so on, such as neither one nor many and so on. The analysis, the realization of emptiness through the analysis of external phenomena depends upon inferential valid cognition, because no one on the path of accumulation or path of juncture, so no one who has not achieved the first bodhisattva level can directly experience the emptiness or dharmata of external phenomena. And that's why in the path of the sutras, in the path of inferential valid cognition, in the path of the pundit, it's said that you can't realize emptiness until you're first level bodhisattva. However, the way Trungpa Rinpoche explains it is there is one exception to that. And that is that because your mind can be aware of itself, anyone, even a person on the path of accumulation or the path of juncture, person who may be aeons away from achieving the path of seeing, can directly experience the emptiness of your own mind, because it's not concealed from itself. The difference is the emptiness of external phenomena is concealed from us by our veils. But our veils, our samsaric obscurations, don't completely cover, they're not capable of hiding our minds from ourselves. And so therefore, he said, the path of direct valid cognition, which is the path of placement meditation, basically consists of training your mind to look at itself. That any other object cannot be, you can't recognize the emptiness of anything other than your own mind until you are a bodhisattva. But you can, as an ordinary person, an aspiring bodhisattva, recognize and experience the emptiness of your own mind, he says, very easily. And once you recognize the emptiness of any one thing, it's identical to the emptiness of every other thing. And that's why he says in our tradition, we don't particularly emphasize the logical analysis of external phenomena, because their true nature is hidden from us. We emphasize the recognition of the mind's nature. So in that context, that's what Trungpa Rinpoche says. So in that context, there may be some use of analytical meditation, especially in both the Mahamudra and Dzogchen traditions. Almost always there's use of the technique called origin, location, destination. Search for the mind's origin, location, destination. This is almost always done, especially in the Dzogchen tradition, as a preliminary. And technically that's analytic meditation, but it's really borrowed from the analytic tradition as a preliminary, an expeditious preliminary prior to the pointing out. So in other words, the real difference is, are you meditating on the nature of external phenomena, or are you meditating on the nature of your own mind? Because the nature of your own mind is something that you as an ordinary person can see right now, today, no matter who you are. The only thing preventing you from seeing it is that you don't think you can see it. It's so close to you, you're not used to looking at it. And it's so easy, you don't believe how easy it is, so you're looking, as the songs say, for something more, something better. And it's, That's what, and you don't think you can do it. So that's the difference, as Trungpa Rinpoche explains it.
I have a little follow-up. So our Nundro preliminary practices and the deity practices and the guru yoga that we do, are those insight meditations or tranquility meditations, or what are they considered?
The ngondro the jetok ke tsosa the tsigi yore. Cherem de shine ge chatan latong ge cha nika yo songita. De lamna ga jene. Well, there's a difference. But you also have to understand that it depends on exactly what you're doing, when you do them. Because it's quite possible that someone could be doing the preliminaries while resting in Mahamudra, in which case it's Mahamudra. But basically the standard answer to that, the textbook answer would be that the preliminaries, the ngondro, are post-meditation practices because you're not in even placement of accumulation purification. So they're accessory practices. That's why they're called preliminaries, even though they're more important than the main practice because they do the real work, the heavy lifting, but they're not the quarterback. They're not the star. The generation stage is said to be a tantric integration of tranquility and insight. The tranquility aspect is the clear appearance of the deity and resting your mind on it. The recognition of that the image of the deity is nothing other than your mind, it's simply your mind taking that form, is the insight aspect.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the teaching, Rinpoche. So sometimes when I hear these teachings, like when you're talking about the poem or the song, it seems that okay, I can look at the nature of my mind and it's great. And then when Rinpoche talks about tranquility, blah blah blah, then I'm like, well, maybe I'm still practicing tranquility meditation in one way or another. So my question is, should I be worrying about that so much and just kind of rest more? And then I guess my second question is, I find if I'm about my day and I look at the nature of my mind, I can sustain it for a fairly long period of time, and then eventually I start to get a little bit tired, like my mind gets tired of doing it. And then I try and look at that, because obviously that's just mind popping up, doing its own thing, but eventually it kind of, even that wears off and I get distracted. I'm wondering, what's the appropriate way to deal with that being tired? Should I look at it? Should I, or am I being a little bit too heavy-handed?
Lama take a song, down a give a pain song, down a take with Nimic song. Tendech and a song, you have a council you might give more take a 12 days. Lama Choranke give a pain on the share the council. Lama Chanan dashing home in Doya learning. That give on our party and don't say some bullet in the shake those. Dick me near me, they share the council. That give on other Yawan and Doya days. And Lama Chanan can they, that song was shaking the taco and do. Or that tender would take the regular days. Don't know Paju Soju so you to capsule. Take corner on the la take the take Gosan to Sansan. Take corner, take Gosan to Sansan. Tender young order that Tonda Mama Tanda Chick Sonia to the Chennai. What is
There's a Tibetan saying about this, because this is such a common feature of the way Dharma is taught. that a Lama was teaching, and an elderly woman. Elderly women in Tibetan stories are always, they're kind of blunt wisdom, figures of blunt wisdom. So an elderly woman asked a question, and they always address the elephant in the shrine room in these stories. And so she asked a question. She said, Lama, when I hear you describing the benefits of virtue and dharma and good deeds, I think, well, not only you, of course, but even this old woman must surely be destined for a pure realm. And when I hear you talk about the effects of wrongdoing, I think that not only surely this old woman, but even you, Lama, are going to hell. You know, the teachings, because they move for emphasis back and forth within a given lecture, it's a little bit like being thrown against one wall and then being ripped off of that and thrown against another wall. The truth, as usual, is somewhere in between. As a practical solution to this issue, first of all, the issue of am I seeing my mind's nature or not? There's nobody who doesn't, from time to time, see the nature of their mind. Everybody from time to time sees the nature of their mind. It would be impossible not to, but we don't know. Usually we don't know what it is we're seeing. The problem is, can we sustain it? Once it's been formally pointed out and recognized, which for Khenpo Jigme Punso, one of Lama Trotop's teachers, had a way of explaining it that's very, very helpful. It's been helpful to me. Because, you know, when we talk about recognition, realization, and then people think, does this mean the first bodhisattva level? And then you test yourself and you say, well, I sure as hell ain't achieved the first bodhisattva level. So what I'm seeing must not be the nature of my mind. And then so how does all this fit together, you know? And what Khenpo Jingpun said about this is that a person on any level of the path can recognize their mind's nature when it's pointed out. But there is a distinction, depending upon that person's level, as to what that recognition consists of. A person on the path of accumulation, which is the first of the 5 paths, when they recognize their mind's nature, do so as understanding. We understand what the teacher said. It's not direct experience, and it's not realization. Well, then you might ask, what is the value in it? The value in it is tremendous, because that understanding enables you to meditate on it. So it's sufficient for meditation. And eventually, when you reach the path of juncture, will become direct experience. And when you reach the path of seeing and become a bodhisattva, will become realization. If a person on the path of juncture receives the same pointing out instruction, they will recognize their mind's nature, not merely as understanding and not as realization, but as direct experience. And when someone on the path of seeing receives that pointing out instruction, they realize it as realization, which is called simultaneous realization and liberation. So it's valid for any of us to receive this, and we should not think that we are unworthy of it. But we have to admit that we are where we are, and we go from there. So the answer to whether you're seeing your mind's nature or not is, of course, yes. But sustaining it is very difficult, which is why Guru Rinpoche recommended short spurts, frequent short spurts of looking. It's in attempting to prolong the recognition that we spoil it, because because we're controlling it. We're trying to. I used to say tilting the machine, but nobody even knows what pinball is anymore. So, so you play it on the computer, and so it doesn't, So the analogy is a 20th century analogy, but so you want to avoid tilting the machine. Guru Rinpoche's recommendation is short flashes of it. So what does that mean in terms of formal practice? That's why we spend the bulk of our practice time doing techniques with content, such as Ngondro practice, generation stage practice, or other types of meditation, Tonglen, various things that have content to them. And during those, and especially at the end of each session, you periodically flash on recognition of your mind's nature. So while you're meditating on yourself as Guru Rinpoche and reciting his mantra, you look to see, is the image of the deity separate from my mind or not? And then you look at it and you realize that the image itself, the stuff of which the image is made, like any other thought, is Dharmakaya. So that's how to do it. You periodic, Guru Rinpoche's recommendation is frequent, short flashes or spurts.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
What is this microphone developed a gas problem?
Hello.
I cursed it yesterday when I made that remark about gas.
Rinpoche, can you hear me? That's not me. Okay, sorry. This question comes from somebody watching the webcast, and I'm going to read it verbatim. Yesterday, several times there were instructions that the antidote to certain issues is to pray harder and or more. Often praying in our culture is more similar to discursive efforts and is very different from what I think should be done. Can Rinpoche give guidance on praying without being discursive?
Yeah. The chedonso data de tetsom la sopa dona de goya la bache yodo zo de lama la soba dapa de nyempo so chi shure so. Da lama la soba dapa kasa da ngatso ke soba dap sena namtor wa samlo tong go de chunga marepes. Well, of course, the act of prayer is discursive, but that's not a problem.
Another question is, please ask, for those of us who work and don't have much time for daily practice, how do we know when we're ready to proceed from one type of meditation to the next? For example, if we can follow our breath for 15 minutes without distraction, can we then proceed to looking at a statue of the Buddha, or do we need to be able to sustain following the breath for a longer period of time?
The gomyon tongo ma to the long mepa ke kanza the lega shukchempo chale mombo yopa de tsoke that the pena de utla tembe shine gomna da kama chonga samla sem utla te topna dene de napa ne pena sonje chikula mekpatena digire pes yana It doesn't matter. You can either continue to work with the breath or switch to the Buddha statue at any time. What's important is, regardless of the support, that it work for you personally, that it bring a progress, that it enable you to rest your mind wakefully.
One more question from the internet. When you become distracted during meditation, is it better to look directly at the thought that is distracting you or at the mind itself?
The gom jabdo namto ke yeng songwa yana. The namto koronge ngo la tana gajere dam. The yeng song ngo sheken ke rikpa ke ngo la tana yagare kan yagare.
Tate kane songedo chetang kene rangye kene gongkin na ne koran namto ngo semba tang tene semde mixe kita Abu Jingoptown, Cocarina, Tingola, so take some of the what.
Low.
Tenia, tell Chaking is in a compenda way, Santa Coran Lavanda. Zona de Giodo. So, Tasso Kala, you made rally.
Well, the response to distraction depends upon what you're practicing. If you're practicing common tranquility, then as soon as you notice that you're distracted, you don't try to look either at your mind or at the nature of the thought, but you simply return to the technique without anything other intervening. So return to the breath if you're following the breath, return to mere attention to the image of the Buddha if you're doing that. If you're practicing the tranquility aspect of Mahamudra, then you could do either. You could either look at the nature of the thought or at the nature of the awareness that recognizes the thought. And then if you're engaged in levels beyond that, there are specific instructions that are not,
Thank you.
we're not going to get into.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche. I wonder when I'm talking to people who are not Buddhists and they start talking about meditation and how much they would love to learn to meditate, or they're already meditating and enjoying it so much and getting so much out of it. And then I think, I understand that without the teachings of the nature of the mind, is it true that meditation is pretty much a waste of time? But do I say that, or do I just say, wow, that's wonderful that you're meditating, keep it up?
Gensong nangpa mayimba tsok gongja gdwa shini.
No.
Ha konsa de ape chipo pe yapo jongsong mompa labje dos kare lako.
Kate Koran to Kare Gongo na Taya Bores Yagana Mendo, Statella Chatange Kare Koran so Labjon Soviona Tella Mateva Maso Jota Nambak Karchimochidare. That the Koran Samba was thinking Telina Pam Yori, so que Ranong Devot in it, and you talk to Yori. Tangone, Tanegi. Tatende gom de ki yote tele chepat phagwa gomya yore sena tene tende de yore sene lamne ya porwas te mato chegi chana gom pete non do ta de mdo singe te discourage so yare.
Well, there's actually a rule about this in Buddhism, which is that you're not allowed to refute somebody else's view or practice unless they ask you. So if somebody else describes some kind of, for example, mindfulness-based stress reduction meditation or whatever it is, then you should simply say that's good. Because in fact it is good. It's not a waste of time. Nothing good is a waste of time. And it's actually, we're highly, Rinpoche used the word discouraged. We're discouraged by the Buddha from criticizing other spiritual exercises, unless somebody asks. But if they ask something like, "Oh, in your tradition, is there anything beyond that in meditation?" Then you can say yes and say a little bit about what there is. But they have to ask.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
That's it. Dutsu dosons. So we'll conclude this morning with dedication and aspirations.
Jegai namja balai roba yesiben sole roa yo gewai de ye gewoi Sana Yeshe Lezon Tambai Genye Dobar Goy Sanjay Zene Rinpoche Maje Banai Jijera Jebai Nyambai Mebai Konye Gondam Bavar Goy Semje Tamje Dedai Dimjera Je Endoy Tamje Dade Lombar Goy Sanja Sambai Kanda Saryob Teda Ganje Mananda Goy Sanje Rejara Donze Tambe Garajara
Thank you. Thank you.